changed the name of this podcast to Refuse to Fail from Over in 80 Minutes, which is what it was, and what you've seen at this time of recording on the Instagram, which is probably why you're confused why it says Refuse to Fail up on the top. But it was the quote I have. So I've started asking people about quotes because the quote I have, and I think I may have made up, but I probably heard it somewhere, so I don't claim it as my own, is everybody wants to succeed nowadays. The one to succeed isn't enough. You have to refuse to fail. And I think your refuse to fail moment was when you got back in that pool. Did you say that was your refuse to fail moment?
Yeah.
I love that. I think it's really good. But now we're going to talk about a really happy point, or what I think would be a happy point for you. 2019. So you're now back in the pool. You've done the European Champs. 2019, you became a triple world champion.
Yep.
That is the coolest sentence I think I've ever said to anybody in my life. That is unbelievable. How was that year for you? Because at this point, are you at Loughborough?
No, not in 2019. No, so I was
so you're not even a student athlete of the Loughborough program yet. You're still Manchester at this point.
Yeah. So I was still doing my undergrad degree. I actually graduated in 2019. Still under Graham Smith.
I'm thinking about what I was doing as an undergrad, and I was not a triple world champion. So that's unbelievable.
That was actually quite a tricky season for me because immediately after Europeans, at the end of September, I had bilateral shoulder surgery.
Of course you did, because why make it any more difficult than it needs to be?
Which was obviously like a difficult decision, but I knew that if I wanted to get to Tokyo, that was the only way I was going to get there because my shoulders weren't good. Like, they needed fixing.
Okay.
And unfortunately, I fixed the joint issues. Kind of a common thing with me is you fix something and you find something else wrong. So I've still got ongoing issues with, luckily it's only my right shoulder now, but my tendons from like obviously all the swimming all the years, the repetitive overhead movement, swimming through injuries, the fact like the last 5 years I've been a full-time wheelchair user, and like before that I used to put all my weight onto crutches, like when I used a walker and wheelchairs. My arms never get a rest, my shoulders never get a rest. So like from all this overuse, I've got quite a lot of damage to quite a few of my, like 3 out of 4 of my rotator cuff tendons. So my shoulders aren't great. But the good thing was that having the surgery actually massively reduced the nerve pain. It almost completely got rid of it. To the point where I didn't need nerve blocks anymore, because I was having nerve blocks to help me get through so that I could actually function as a human being and sit in lectures and train. But every time you have a nerve block, it damages some of that connection. So you can't actually, the brain can't connect to the muscle as well. So like every time you have it, you're basically getting rid of part of your muscle function, which obviously isn't great. I was having it every 3 months for a few years. So like every single time, you're having a permanent impact on the function of your muscle, which obviously for someone who uses their arms all the time and needs them isn't great. So like having the surgery was amazing. It fixed that issue. However, I think everyone kind of underestimated how long it takes to recover. The surgeon was like, "Oh, you can get back in the water after a month and do a leg kick," and I was like, "Well, I can't kick, so you know, right." So I think after like 2 months, I was doing like standing up in the water, like leaning against the wall and doing like arm movements, like rehab stuff with the physio, and that was great. So at that point, I decided that I needed to move back down to the centre, which was obviously a tough decision. So that's when I started with Graham Smith again. That was really daunting, and obviously like with the PTSD and dealing with everything, that was a really hard decision. But I knew that I couldn't get the support I needed because at that point there was a physio that I'd obviously known for many years, and he was there every single day, every single session. So you like if you turned up and you weren't ready to swim, you could see the physio and then just come back for the evening session, just swap sessions. Okay. So it's kind of what I needed, and I needed like I was doing rehab every single day with him. So it was kind of I just needed to do it, which obviously I was gutted to. So I was really happy where I was with City Manchester and MMU with Jim, but it's just sometimes you've just got to do stuff just for the better of obviously your career. And I really like it took me a long time to get back into it. Like with cerebral palsy, like I was always told when I was younger, as soon as you stop using muscles, you're going to lose them. And it's always taken me so much longer than anyone else to build muscle. I think that's quite typical for cerebral palsy. But yeah, the fact that I couldn't move, and because I had both shoulders done at once so that I could recover and be all right for Tokyo and have a full training season, like I literally couldn't move at all for a month, like because I need my arms to even get out of bed and like sit up. So I'd lost so much strength, and the nerve pain actually. So the joint issue was causing nerve pain. So my dystonia was reacting, and it was actually causing a lot of tone. So I had really tight muscles, but it was from my dystonia. So as soon as you got rid of the surgery, got rid of the pain, I was then really weak because what I was using was my dystonia to move. So
Oh
like a
wow.
kind of like, I don't know if anyone's seen, like, kids with cerebral palsy can have a surgery called SDR, selective dorsal rhizotomy, where they literally cut the sensory nerves and it gets rid of most of the spasticity. However, you'll see that it takes them 1 to 2 years to recover because they use that spasticity, the tightness, to actually walk and move. So when you get rid of that, they have no strength underneath because there's so many muscles that they've never been able to use that didn't work. So it was kind of a similar thing that I had the surgery, and I don't regret it. It was great, but I then didn't have any strength. All the strength that I was using to move and swim was gone.
Wow.
Um, so it took me about 8 months to get anywhere near as strong as I needed to be. And it's still an issue I struggle now, is being strong enough not to get injured. It's an ongoing battle, which is quite infuriating, but the surgery really made my quality of life much better. So I wouldn't change it for anything, even though it's been a struggle. So I didn't really know.
That's an interesting one because that's you weighing up Tully Kearney the person
Yeah.
against Tully Kearney the athlete, which
Well,
I think you've made a right choice there because you're
yeah.
looking after yourself
Like,
there, definitely.
pre-Rio, all I cared about was Tully Kearney, the athlete.
Yeah.
Post-Rio, like with everything that went on, my number one priority now is me as a person. Like I'm not willing to do anything that's gonna risk permanent damage to my body because I need my body after sport. I'm not gonna swim forever, and I've realised that swimming isn't everything. Like I love swimming, and it's something I want to do for a good few more years to come. But I'm not gonna do it at a detriment to my health because it's not worth it. Like I learned that the
Wow.
hard way. Um, and as well, like, I haven't got that much function left to lose. Like, I don't want to be more disabled than what I am. Like, I want to be able to function as a human being and have a 9 to 5 job, and be able to do stuff I want to do and enjoy life as an adult. Um, so that was kind of where my mind's at now. It has really changed. Like everything that's happened has really changed my mindset, and something that, like, I say a lot to young athletes is that it's really difficult when you've got coaches, doctors, your governing body, like you've got everyone that effectively is in charge of your funding and your payment and like your level in sport and selecting you for things, telling you to just get another steroid injection and race through and do this and do that. And it's really difficult to say no to that. And also to realize at a young age how much damage that can potentially cause. But and it's really important for athletes to actually have a say, and for doctors to actually realize how much damage that can cause, because a 15, 16, 17, 18-year-old isn't going to think, oh, I've severely damaged my hip, but I'm going to swim through it, not thinking about, oh, am I going to actually be able to walk when I'm older? Like, is this going to cause me like arthritis or chronic pain every day? Like, they're not going to think that way. So I think it's really important that the governing bodies actually think about that, but also that the young athletes grow up knowing that they can say no. They don't have to just agree to swim through injuries and agree to it's their body. They have to think about what's right for them and what's right for the rest of their life, not just their career. And really make an informed decision about what am I going to do? Am I going to risk it, or am I going to be sensible and give my body the rest it needs?
I agree, and I think you put that perfectly as well. That's also on the coaches as much as it is on for coaches and
Yeah.
managers and teams organisers as much as it is the athlete. Because sometimes a coach's job is to protect an athlete from himself. Because an athlete will think I need to do this because, like you say, like funding comes into part of it. You're like, oh, I stop getting the money if I stop racing, but
Especially like when you
sometimes there isn't. Yeah.
When you train at a performance center where your coach is the governing body coach, the GB coach, that is the issue as well, because they want you to win medals and keep winning medals, so they keep their jobs and we keep the funding.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's definitely a lot better than it used to be, but previously we were seen as a number and a way to keep their medals. We weren't seen as Tully the human being. Whereas the new coach we have in Manchester now is amazing, and his first priority is mental health, second priority is physical health, third priority is training. And that is the way that coaches need to be. And I love the fact that they've brought him in. He's honestly the best fit, the best person they could have brought in as to replace like for a coach that we needed. And I think I'm hoping, like, obviously him being the coach of a centre, that other coaches that have got para athletes around the country that come and train at Manchester for days to use the equipment and the services we have at the centre will actually see, oh yeah, this is the way it should be with my athletes, and is a really good role model for that. Because it doesn't, in most sports, it doesn't happen. There's so many coaches that don't prioritize their athletes' well-being, and it's so important. It's the most important thing, because not only the fact, obviously, their emotional, physical, social, mental well-being should be the most important thing anyway. If they're not happy and they're not healthy, they're not going to swim well anyway, are they? Or compete well in whatever sport they do.
I agree. Yeah, if you're not healthy, yeah, it's like you wouldn't let somebody swim if they broke their arm. So if somebody's not feeling right, why would you not let them? Like, why would you let them
Yeah,
swim?
I think that's the thing. Like with mental health as well, like we need to be looking at it like that, and we don't. I think it's definitely getting better, and it's way different than it was 10 years ago when I was like growing up and starting in the sport. But it's definitely something we need to work at.
I could not agree more. And yeah, I think once again, you know exactly the right words to say in the situation because you've experienced it, you've lived it, you've analyzed it, and you've seen it get better, and you see the steps it has to go to get better, and like even better. So that is truly remarkable. And like, so tell me more about the difficulty of that year in 2019, because as I said, when
Yeah.
I made it sound ridiculously simple. Of you won a lot more medals and became triple world champion, but you said it was there. But how was those events at the World Championships? Because I'm going to talk about Madeira as well in
Mm.
2022, just last year, which was another ridiculous tally, which we'll get on to. But
So
yeah, like talk me through 2019, just like briefly, like just sort of bullet point 2019, where you won it, how you won it, and then the emotion that came through each one.
so I was nervous about my fitness. I'd been in the pool for 12 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we'd gone on a training camp just before in like as like a holding camp in Italy, and I did like one stand up swim and it was terrible and I was in loads of pain. And like the coach, my coach looked at me and was like, "Oh God!" But Graham had so much confidence in me that he knew what I could do better than anyone, and I now know that British Swimming actually tried to pull me from the world's team at that point, and he said no. He fought for me and was like, "No, she's fine. Like she'll do it," because he knows that I'm kind of weird. I am a natural racer. Like I get behind the blocks, and it's taken me years to get to this point because I used to be terrible when I used to get too anxious and stressed, and then I would get my dystonia would flare up and I get too stiff to swim,
Mm-hmm.
and then my stroke would be terrible and I'd swim really slowly. But I'm just like I can't. It's hard to explain. I get behind the block and it's like a switch flips, and I'm just there, like I'm in race mode, and I have to be in a very, very bad way to not be able to race well. Like even like Tokyo, I had a really serious injury and I still swam well. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so it's kind for me, it's kind of a mental battle. It's like I know I'm not fully fit, especially for the long distances. It's more the mental battle of I'm in race mode, but I can't go flat out because I'll die because my fitness isn't good. So that was kind of the biggest challenge for me. Is like don't go crazy, especially on the 200, because you will die and people will catch up and beat you, and you probably won't finish the race.
Mm-hmm.
So that was kind of the biggest thing. But we kind of tried something. So after the surgery, because I couldn't swim much, I finally gave in to my mate Hannah Dines, and she'd been bugging me for years to try frame running, which is it's athletics and it's like a three-wheel frame. If you imagine a trike, it's a
Mm-hmm.
one wheel at the front, two wheels at the back, quite a wide frame.
It's the one with the really long wheel at the front, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, well,
It's
it's
on
just
like
like
an
a normal
almost
bike wheel. It's
yeah.
like a 700C bike wheels. They run off
Mm-hmm.
at least the size I need because I'm quite tall. Um, and basically, it's got a seat like a bike seat, but instead of pedals, there's nothing there, and you're leaned forward on a chest plate, so the frame's taking all your body weight, and it was made for people severe, um, too severely impaired. Basically, people with cerebral palsy that were too severely impaired to do wheelchair racing. There was a wheelchair
Okay.
racer who invented it, who was paralysed, but her friends had cerebral palsy, but they were too disabled to do wheelchair racing, so they did throwing, but they wanted to do something physically active. So she basically invented this, and it's honestly an incredible sport that I love. And it's so good to get like kids that can't walk, you put them on a frame and they can walk around the garden, like they can run, like it's just incredible. It gives them that freedom to move at their own pace and not be in an electric wheelchair all day.
Mm-hmm.
But basically, she took me down to the track where her frame was kept, introduced me to Stockport Wheelchair Racing Club, and she let me borrow her frame for 8 months until I got mine built. And I just fell in love with it, like because I've never been good, I've never been able to use my legs for stuff. I've never been able to run, play football, stuff like that. So I was actually able to run, like for the first time in my life, at the age of what, like 19. I was able, or 20, 19, 20, I was like actually able to run, which was kind of insane to me.
Wow.
Um, and I just love it. Like in the water, I'm just arms, so it was a way to use my legs. It because it's so much harder for me to move my legs. My heart rate is way higher, so I can get the cardiovascular benefits without having to do as much. And it was kind of a test of like, obviously I need to swim, but I can't swim very much and I can't do much intensity because of my shoulder. So how much can we play around with on track, and how much cross training can we do? And honestly, it obviously worked perfectly because I went to Worlds really nervous, not knowing where my fitness was at, because I wasn't able to swim quick and test it in the pool because my shoulder wasn't ready until literally like the days before racing. So I got there, and I think the 50 freestyle was first, and I knew it was going to be a tight race. The sprints are always really tight races, and the heats I did a PB. And I was like, okay, this is actually, but 50 is quite easy. It's not an easy event, but in terms of endurance, you don't need that much endurance to do a sprint 50. Like a lot of people, when they're retired from swimming, can still do a very quick 50 because
Okay.
it's realistically 30 seconds or under. I feel like it's a short race.
It's more muscle memory and power than it is
Yeah.
cardiovascular. Yeah.
But I got into the final, I PB'd again, I won, and I was like, okay, this is really cool. I was like, this is like the quickest anyone had ever gone, like for years, quickest in Europe, but also the quickest anyone as an S5 had done in absolute years. Because again, the world records were very quick, but no one had touched them in some of them even 20 years. Like no one had been anywhere near them.
Mhm.
I can't remember what was next. It was either the 200 or the 100, but then I won another one, and then I was like, oh, okay, actually, my fitness isn't too bad. Like, this is actually pretty cool. Maybe Graham was right. Like, maybe he was right that I could win all these. And then it was kind of like, oh God, I've got one left, and I was like, well, I don't want to put too much pressure on myself because I don't want to like, get too stressed and anxious and like not win. But also, how cool would it be to win all three of my races? Like, I only had 3 races. How cool would it be to win all 3 of them? And then obviously it happened. So I think that was the biggest thing for me, is like, oh, well, actually, this is probably a way forward. Cross training actually works really well. Like I haven't swum very much at all, but I've raced really well. My fitness is really good. And that's kind of like where I started to work with British Swimming. At first, they weren't really that happy and weren't convinced. And I had to buy a Garmin and wear a heart rate monitor every single session and compare it to my swim heart rate data to prove that it actually has a cardiovascular benefit, because they didn't believe me. But now they accept it as part of my training. So
That's
it
good.
was obviously a hard thing, but no, it's become an integral part, like a really important part, especially pre-Tokyo and Madeira in 21. It's it is literally the only way that I can be fit enough, and especially like in blocks, like normally winter training, I train more on land, like on the track, than I do in the pool.
I love that one. Do you think so when that comes across to me in that brain, do you think the cross training would have been beneficial throughout, or do you think you really had to get that nailed down of the swim first? Because obviously when you're out the pool, you're not practicing the stroke, and obviously you have to learn that muscle memory. So would you, obviously the cross training is clearly beneficial, because I'm not going to argue with 3 world championships. But do you think you could have had that same success doing that throughout, or do you think you needed to have that purely swimming focus? And then, like, would you recommend it as a more transitional thing to bring in as you grow in a sport?
I think it's better for, like, when I was younger, I could easily cope with 20 hours a week in the pool. Like that was fine. I think it's more for athletes that are older, lower classifications, like for me, that struggle to physically cope with the demand. And because I think the issue when I was first classified as an S5, coaches were like, well, I know this 5 from Germany and she does like 17K a week and you're only doing 5. And I'm like, well, yeah, but she's got a spine injury. It's different. Like the part of her body that does works normally, like she can recover quicker. So it was kind of like trying to not be compared to other people that can be, obviously everyone's different, but especially for me. And I think the reason it works is because I've got muscle memories from all the years. Like I started training when I was 8.
Yeah.
And I started ramping up the volume when I was 13. So I had like a good 5-6 year block of a crazy amount of meters. And I think that's given me a good baseline because I can get fit really quickly. So I think if someone was coming into sport and trying to cross train, I don't know how effective it would be. But if someone, like, look at Adam Peaty, like with his broken ankle, broken foot, like it's proved, like lockdown. If you look at the athletes that actually did training during lockdown, that did running, cycling, whatever, like got pools in the back garden, they competed way better at the Olympics, Paralympics than the athletes that did nothing. Like it does have an effect. It definitely has an effect. And it made our transition when we're allowed back into training much smoother and easier. So I think, like, if there's a time where you can't swim, you've got an injury, you decide to have surgery, you've broken your foot, or like me, you've got dodgy shoulders because you've trained all these years and you're trying to protect your shoulders, or like sometimes swimmers can be like backs, knees, necks. If you've got an injury, or like something that's prone to injury, I think it's a really good thing to look into cross training, and especially if your sport is causing you pain. Like, there's got to be another way around it. That's kind of, for me, like, there's always another way, and frame running for me has been that other way. And obviously, cross training is not going to work for everyone, but if you've got an athlete that can't physically put in the hours that's needed to be as fit as they need to be, then why not look at something else?
Mm-hmm. Once again, the proof's in the pudding. You've smashed it. You're doing that, and now we're going to talk about what I consider to be the "haha, I told you so" moment for you, which is everything sort of come together. We've had such adversity. You've had initial success that you've had to work on. You've been rewarded with that. Then, like I said, we had 2016, which was a horrible year for anybody to go through. Then you've had London European Championships. We get to Madeira, and I'm just going to read this out for the listeners here. So you were competing at Madeira. This is another World Champs. We're doing 3 individual events and 1 mixed event. Your worst finish in the whole thing was second. That was your worst finish in all of the races you did that weekend or that week. How you broke 3 world records, and one of them, like you said, was 22 years old. So that is ludicrous. How does it feel when I read that back to you?
Crazy. Like, unbelievable.
Do you know how I know that you mean that? Because you have answered everything with so much detail in it, and it's crazy. There's only one word for it.
I think it's unheard of. You don't really hear of an athlete going to a major champs and breaking a world record in all 3 of their individual races.
You don't hear people going, and you very rarely hear people doing it in 1. Never mind 3.
Yeah.
So how was that collection of days for you? And then does it feel? How did it feel breaking the first world record? And then how did it feel when you broke the 3rd one after you'd done that?
It was a weird meet for me because after Tokyo, with the restructure of British swimming, my coach Graham Smith was made redundant, and I relied on him. Like I said earlier, he knew what to say to me. I relied on that too much, and it was really difficult. So that was like my first international not having him there, and I kind of didn't really know what to do with myself. Like, I was really struggling, and I kind of felt like no one had my back. Like, I really had to fight for myself. Because originally I was supposed to do more relays, and then because of my shoulder injury, they withdrew me because, again, I had another injury. Unfortunately, like that season, I swam really well at the German Open in Berlin, and that was my first time, like, since I first raced there 11 years before, that I went back. And so that was like an incredible experience. Swam really well, broke a world record in the 53, and that was my first time in years racing without a physio support, like without actually a physio or soft tissue therapist being there. So that was like a really big achievement for me. Unfortunately, getting back, we didn't have consistent coaches. Like, when my coach was made redundant, we had 3 coaches rotating to trainers, so there was a lack of communication, and I wasn't rested after racing, which for me is a massive thing to protect my shoulder. So I ended up with quite a bad injury, and had to swim through it because, again, every day, like every other day or every day sometimes, it was a different coach. So there wasn't that communication. There wasn't the consistency of them seeing how much I was struggling. And because of the injury, I was left behind from a training camp. So we were supposed to go on a training camp for 2 weeks to Lanzarote. And I'd already, in February, because I didn't go to trials, I'd already spent a week at Loughborough Uni to try, and I was scoping it out for next season for what was supposed to be the September just gone. And so the head coach was like, "Why don't you just go to Loughborough for 2 weeks?" And I was like, "You know what? Okay." Like, I got on really well with the coach there. One of the athletes there, James Hollis, like, I met him in like 2011, so I knew him really well. And I was like, "You know what? Yeah, I'll just go back to Loughborough. You know, it's fine. Go for 2 weeks." And
Not
then I
quite Lanzarote, but it's still.
Yeah, like, obviously this injury was pretty bad. I had a steroid injection, had to wait a week for it to settle before I could actually swim. And this coach he just reminds me so much of Graham. Like, Gareth was amazing, the Loughborough coach at the time. Like, just got me. Like, hadn't worked with that many para athletes before. Had one S5 swimmer that he coached towards Tokyo. And that was kind of, obviously, James, a higher classification athlete, but not really had that much experience. But he was willing to learn, willing to listen. And he actually let me have control and say over my training, which is what I was used to. And obviously, someone at my level, I know what works and what doesn't. Obviously, I want a coach's input and I need a coach's input, but I also like to have my own input into my training, and I wasn't getting that. And that's a big thing for me. And basically, after the 2 weeks, I realised I was so much calmer. I had way more energy because of the PTSD, and that's kind of what made me realise how much I still struggle in Manchester. And if I'm in a different environment, my life is easier. Like I just feel better. Like I can sleep better. Like it's just kind of crazy. And I just got on so well that I was like, you know what? I'm not going back. So I just like, I was really nervous. Had a Zoom call and was like, I don't want to come back to Manchester. So the plan originally was for me to go back to Manchester, and then after Worlds, I was supposed to spend a month in Loughborough as a trial, and then if I like it, move in September. But I ended up staying there for 12 weeks instead.
If it's the better fit for you, it makes sense to stay
Yeah.
there.
So obviously, like going into Worlds, I Gareth was really good. I bugged him, like I messaged him and phoned him a lot while I was there, just for a bit of like moral support. But it was my first time since 2015 not having my coach at the meet. And like when you're a centre athlete, your coach is at every single camp or competition you go to. So suddenly not having them there is really, really difficult. So that was kind of my biggest thing, is like, oh, I've got no one here. Like I feel alone. And obviously I wasn't. Like the other British members of staff were there, like Gareth was there on the other end of the phone. But I was just really nervous, and I knew my fitness was really good because I'd done so much track work. And I've been working really well with a group in, like being in Loughborough, like there's a group in Coventry wheelchair racers, so I was training with them, and like I knew my fitness was as good as it had been in, like probably better than it had ever been, to be honest, like for at least for the last 6-7 years. So I knew going in I had good chance of swimming well. For me it was more, I had to control emotions, like I had to try and figure out how to cope without having that one person, without having Graham there getting me in the right headspace. So that was difficult, and also knowing that I needed to protect my shoulder. My shoulder wasn't in a great space, and it was my first time of having to swim heat smart, like purposely swimming slower in the heats and not caring if you get lane 4. So obviously, like the quicker, because it's spearheaded, the quickest goes in lane 4. But like the biggest thing that was drilled into me, you don't need to be in lane 4. You only need to be like within the top 4 lanes. If you're in the end lane, it's a bit harder. If you're in the top 4 lanes, it doesn't matter. So it was purposely swimming slowly in the heats to save my shoulder, because swimming slower doesn't hurt my shoulder that much. And then by the time I get into the final, being all right, because that was kind of the issue in Tokyo, was I went flat out in the heats and I was in so much pain that it wouldn't settle between heats and finals. And then because I was racing day 1, day 2, I was just in pain constantly the whole time. It didn't settle. So swimming slow heats and fast finals actually worked really well. But it's so difficult when you've got, like for me, being a natural racer, it's so difficult to
You got people in
control.
front of you.
Yeah, like letting people pass you and letting people turn quicker than you, and it's just, oh, I hate it. I hate it so much. Which I think is a good trait to have.
So are you like talking to yourself in the pool for like these small sections? And are you like, it's
Yeah.
fine, it's fine, it's fine?
And like I don't swim down because I can't, with warm up racing, and then you've got the finals as well. It's too many meters for my shoulder to cope with, especially when I've got to race multiple days in a row over a 10-day meet. So I can't swim down. So then we tried something else. So the new thing was having a really like scalding hot shower for 15 minutes, and then having soft tissue to get rid of any of the remaining lactics as like a flush. And that actually worked really well. So like it was kind of weird. It was kind of trying different things, and working with different people, but so again, like it was a good learning experience for me. Like even at this age, I'm still learning, even at my experience. But yeah, I was so happy, and like that was really the eye opener to me, that if I'm happy, look at how much quicker I can swim. And that's kind of when I knew that Loughborough was the right fit, and that at some point I need to make a decision to actually move.
Wow. I mean, I think this has been arguably. I've been very lucky, so I'm not contracted or anything, so I get to pick and choose who I speak to. I get to pick and choose how long I take between episodes to bring them out. This has been arguably one of the most inspirational, informative, I think just all round, like it's dumbfounding to me, all these things that go on. Like you're talking about, you're having these PTSD, you're talking about these mental blocks that you're having, as well as the physical disabilities that people see and don't see, and people acknowledge but they don't really understand. And when it all came to this head at Madeira, and you got these world records, you got these golds, you got everything, it must just be so rewarding. And obviously you're not finished yet, like you said, your goal is still to be Paralympic athlete.
I think like for me, every time like winning the gold in Tokyo was kind of like, for me, it was like, well, this is a great way to say thank you to everyone that's helped me along the journey. And then again, like breaking 3 world records in Madeira, what better way is it to thank Loughborough Uni for taking me in and working with me for 12 weeks than breaking 3 world records? And for me, unfortunately, Gareth moved on and he's now a lecturer. Like, honestly, he was such a good coach. I was absolutely gutted. But the fact that my last race, like with him, well, I raced in British Summer Championships and I did break world records there. I went even quicker. However, there weren't any drug testers there, so they're counted as European records, but they're not counted as world records. But you know, obviously, I broke them at Worlds.
Gives you a chance to break them again. That's
yes,
the hard
exactly.
limit.
But
Break them
I
in
think it's
Paris.
really nice
Get
for
the
me
cameras.
that it was kind of like, I mean, Gareth doesn't care about his career. He doesn't care about like himself looking good. All he cares about is his athletes, which is obviously what a good coach does. But you know, like what a great thing for him to have. Like the main thing I thought about was, oh, this is amazing for Gareth because he's got this. He's going to have this on like his CV if he ever tries to work at a swimming club again. Like,
I love that.
so.
I love that that's your thought going out of that. I think that says a lot about you as a person as well, and it says a lot about the bond you've grown with Gareth over the years. Because I think another thing that's prevalent throughout this whole conversation we've been talking for 2 hours and 20 minutes, and it's shown like you've been thankful for Gareth at every stage he's been in your journey. And like he says, like he's now might be a lecturer, but I imagine you'll still get a few phone calls every now and again when you're just needing a word of advice.
Yeah, well, like the other week, I raced like just before Christmas. I raced at Corby in their long course meet, and I want to try and do the backstroke because I want more medal opportunities and more races. Because I used to like the 100 free used to be my fun event. I was always terrible at sprints. I was a 400 freestyle and 200 medley swimmer basically, and 100 fly eventually. But I was always terrible at the 100 free, and the 100 free was the event I always entered. I never medaled. I sometimes didn't even final, but it was a fun event, and I miss having that fun event. So I was like, oh, like I'll try and get back into backstroke again because I was doing it in 2018, but with the shoulder surgery and everything, we like to protect my shoulder, we were just focused on freestyle, and then I hadn't swum it in so many years, I didn't have a time, so I couldn't race it in like major meets because I don't have time in the rankings because I haven't raced it since mid 2018. So I raced it hoping, like I kind of had in mind what time I wanted to go. Like I wanted to go under a minute, and preferably like I wanted to go like around 50 seconds. I was like, I'm pretty sure I can go between like 48 and 52 seconds, and try and build up to get closer to like 46, 45-ish by Paris. You know, have it as a potential bronze medal event. Try and see if I can push for another medal. Not expecting a silver or a gold, but you know, if I could get bronze, that's another medal. Like, how cool is that? And I raced it. I went 42 seconds, and I'm now ranked number 2 in the world by a good second from me in the third. And number 1 was 0.6 of a second ahead of me, and she's actually a Turkish swimmer who I'm really good friends with. But one good thing is she was actually so nice to me, and she sent me a message congratulating me, which obviously doesn't always happen when you like start beating your friends. She doesn't usually swim freestyle because she's an arm amputee, so she's just legs. We're pretty much the opposite of each other. But arm amputees, where they're just legs, don't really usually do sprint events because they've got a more advantage over the long distances with the turns and the kick off the walls, like the underwater phase. But she is a backstroker, so she doesn't really do freestyle, so I don't get to race against her much. So I'm like, oh, I get to race against her now. Like, but I'm like, oh no, she's gonna hate me. But actually, she's so nice. But it's just kind of, I messaged Gareth, like, I just sent him a screenshot of that and a screenshot of the world rankings and put, oops, this was supposed to be a fun event.
I wish I could do things and get to second in the world and respond with oops. But that is the perfect place to end the main body of this podcast because it sounds like I'm going to get an excuse to bring you back on in a year or two's time and discuss it all again because, like I said, I've had the most fun, Tully. This has been, like I said, truly inspirational, eye-opening, whatever you want to call it. It's 9, almost 8:30 on a Sunday night, and I'm ready to just go and run through a brick wall because you have inspired me.
Thank you for listening to this Clips episode on YouTube. And then if you want to hear the whole podcast, you can find them on Apple or Spotify, as well as the full video version on this YouTube channel alongside all the other great content we produce on a weekly basis. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope to see you again on another Clips episode or in the full episode podcast. Tweet us, tag us, let us know what you thought. All the links are down in the description. It means the world that you guys come and support us, so thank you very much.